At the Center for Spiritual Living here in Santa Rosa this whole year, we've been exploring the vision that our entire movement has. It's a good thing to do. We can figure out what we're about, what we stand for, what's important to us. So this year we've been looking at all of that. And not only here in Santa Rosa, across our United States and in international territories where some 200 centers are all looking at the same thing together. I think there's something really lovely about the momentum. We're trying to really come to terms with what are we about. So today, we take a statement from our vision to look at, and it's this one, and I invite you to read it with me. We see our communities as being open, receptive, and welcoming to all people of all faiths and all paths. Well, that is a tall order. All people? All the time? All faiths? All of them? You know, every time I see these absolute statements, I panic. I don't know if I can do it. And then I remind myself, you know, that's the nature of a vision. A vision is supposed to stretch me beyond what is already easy to do. Look, I could tone it down a bit. I could say, you know, we see our communities as being open to people we agree with. Bring it down, you know. We're receptive to ideas that we approve of. We are welcoming of people who look like us. Yes, the church should go, ooh. You know, it's awkward, right? Well, there's no potential for learning or growth in that kind of toned down vision. I can already do that. I want to do better. I want to reach higher. I want to get a larger mental equivalent. That's what we call it over here. So let's examine the teaching at the center, the Science of Mind teaching, that inspires us with this idea that we ought to be a welcoming community. It appears everywhere in our teaching. One place I like in particular is page 41 in the Science of Mind. It's got these 4 beautiful statements. Won't you read them with me? The universe is impersonal. It gives to all. It is no respecter of persons. It values each alike. Now, I like to take my time with ideas like these, you know. I like to dwell on them until they dwell in me. I want to contemplate the nature of the universe, the divine, as best as I can, because the way I understand it, spiritual living is all about duplicating the nature of the universe in my personal life. How can I bring my life more and more and more in line with divine life? How can I duplicate its attributes in the way I show up? So I take phrases like these and I restate them in my own words so I can really get clear on the ideas in them. You know, it's a lovely meditative practice. You can use it with any significant piece of writing. It's called passage meditation. So I start with the beginning, the universe. Well, that's another way of saying creation, life itself, divinity. Creation is impersonal. And to me, a better word, I think, in this context for impersonal is neutral. Creation is neutral. It gives to all. We might say it is neutral towards the differences that exist. Well, because diversity is a fact of creation. Different is natural. Nothing in nature is uniform or the same. Why am I going to argue with it then? It's the way of things. And it goes on. Creation is no respecter of persons, or it doesn't discriminate. It values each alike, everyone and everything the same. So now the question is, can I be like that? Can I duplicate that nature in my own attitude, in my own approach to life? Can I be even-handed and equal to all? That's spiritual living. Do you want to know who I'm not even-handed and equal toward? I'll give you a clue. Have you been watching any of the political conventions? Any one of them. And I'm noticing that unlike creation, I am not neutral. Unlike the universe, I have difficulty expressing myself in a way that shows equal value. I'm not liking any of this. I do realize, though, that just because right now I am not capable of it doesn't mean I'm going to settle there. No, I want to do better. I want to do better than what I can do right now. I want to reach higher than where I am right now. My vision has got to be greater than what I'm capable of doing right now. And just because it's difficult doesn't mean it's not worth it. Oh, it's worth it. So how do we work towards this vision of inclusivity? Well, the Science of Mind teaching says that you and I, we have to do both the inner and the outer work. And the inner work starts in your mind with your thinking and your attitude, and the outer work is everything else. So our founder, Ernest Holmes, he says the way to start is in your thinking, and the way you do it is by quite literally having a conversation with yourself. You talk to yourself. You're convincing yourself in your own mind. So you say to yourself silently something like this: I am uniting my thought with the whole of creation. I am consciously aligning myself with all that is. I'm realizing that everywhere present means everywhere present, and so there isn't really anything to align with. I realize I'm already united with all that is. I realize that my life is part of the one life. I realize that my thought is part of the divine mind. See, whatever it takes, and you keep at it and you keep at it until you start to accept it. See, his idea is that every one of us is part of the same whole, but it's so much easier to focus on a feeling of connection with the whole than with a part. Because the whole doesn't have a political party. Because the whole doesn't have a personality. So I don't trip on the differences. I'm pouring my attention instead into this focused feeling of unity with all that is. And he says, Ernest Holmes, he says that when you and I get that right, when we get that feeling of union clearly, that something happens. It becomes impossible for us to hate on anything or anyone that is part of the whole. That's the inner work. And then the outer work is to make sure everything now matches that. The way I speak, the way I walk, the way I talk, the way I sing, what I do, what I choose, everything's got to match that now. So how does oneness with all translate into action in the world? Well, I read about an example of how a vision of oneness might be translated into action in the world. I read about a project. It's called the Urban Confessional, or a free listening project. Free listening. It's a group of people who go out in the world with cardboard signs that say free listening. And they go out into the world and they listen. They don't debate. They don't correct. They don't inform. They don't educate. They listen. That's the beginning and middle and end of what they do. They listen. And one of the participants says, of all of the questions he gets asked the most, this is the one that sticks in his mind. How, people ask, who are wanting to do this listening, how do I listen to someone when I disagree with them? Here's what he says. There are many ways to answer this. It takes a lot of forgiveness, compassion, patience, and courage to listen in the face of disagreement. I could write pages on each of these principles, but let's start with the one thing that makes it possible. We must work to hear the person, not just the opinion. Whew. And he suggests when you and I find ourselves in disagreement, just ask the person, won't you tell me your story? I'd like to know how you came to this point of view. He carries on saying, the truth is, if our love can hold space for paradox, tension, and disagreement, there's room for all types of beliefs and opinions. Decision, he writes, is a choice. Life isn't a Facebook feed. Our love, our listening must bring in, not edit out. So dare to listen, dare to be quiet, dare to seek understanding. In the end, it's the people we need to love, not their opinions. Whew. Then he leaves us with a question. He asks, how do you listen when you disagree with what is being said? And I add on to that. And how does the way you listen represent your understanding of unity? I don't like any of this. It's really messing with me, working me. You want another example of how to match action with a vision of unity? I got one right here. Thank you. It's of a Christian church in Cordova, Tennessee. Some years ago, they reached out to the Muslim community in their town who had a property adjacent to theirs because the community had no place to meet for Ramadan. They were busy building a mosque, and it wasn't going to be ready in time for the Ramadan. And it was at the time when there was all that controversy about Muslim centers, proposed Muslim centers in New York and other places. And so when the community looked for a hall to rent for the Ramadan, they couldn't find anybody who would rent anything to them. So the pastor of the Heart Song Church marched across to the other property and invited the Muslim community to meet in their church. And this is the sign he put outside their building. Heart Song Church welcomes Memphis Islamic Center to the neighborhood. And knowing that some in his community would ask why the church was doing this, why was he welcoming Muslims into the center, he answered, we're loving our neighbors for Christ's sake. And not everybody liked it. Some left. But apparently it was the right thing to do for that community because it matched their inner work. And from whence came their inspiration? Well, their teacher, as expressed, for example, here in Matthew. These are Jesus' words. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Do not even tax collectors do the same? Now, you know I love to paraphrase things in my own words, because that's how I get deeper understanding for myself. So I did. And I said, but I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you accurately represent the unity of creation. Divine mind causes the sun to rise on everyone without consideration of who or what they are. If you love those who love you, what spiritual growth will you achieve? Even those who are corrupt can do that. Have a greater vision for your life, people. Aim higher. Reach higher. Don't give up because it's difficult to be kind. Don't resort to base, low, did I say low language and thinking? Anybody can do that. I'm already good at that. I read in an article that these two communities, the Christian church and the Muslim community, they continued to work together even after the mosque was built. They met together once a month to go out and feed the homeless. And apparently they planned to build a park in the area between their two adjacent properties, a shared park, so that they would truly be neighbors. So here back at home in Santa Rosa Center for Spiritual Living, of course, we would aspire to be the same as those Christians and those free listeners. These are good role models of open, receptive, and welcoming. You see, to match our own teaching of oneness, we would naturally be welcoming of differentness. Different everything. Different faiths, different genders, different paths, different colors, different. Because it says right there in our teaching, from oneness comes diversity, from unity proceeds multiplicity. Why would we resist different then? So, I want you to be welcome, but I may not vote the same way as you. I want you to be welcome, but I may not eat the same way as you. I want you to be welcome, but I may not have listened to you properly. I want you to be happy, but I may have different values than you, and it isn't easy. But I'm committing to doing better. So here it is. Start with the inner work, which means I begin to talk to myself until I have convinced myself of the unity that I feel with all life. And that's an ongoing project. And as I become more and more convinced, I can act accordingly. And that might mean I actually do listen to people with a heart to really hear the person and not their position. It may mean I actually help those people who are in need. It may mean that I stand for those who are persecuted. It may mean that I do not succumb to the language of hatred and separation, because that's the easy way. Oh, I've got to get a much, much greater vision for my life. Something larger than what is average and easy. So I leave you with the question that I'm asking myself this week. Where in my life is there room for me to do a little bit better, to be open, to be receptive, to be welcoming? I invite you to breathe in with me, and to exhale, letting your eyes close for a moment of prayer, in which we each in our own way turn our thought to the divine, that which is everywhere present, the ultimate power. And we dwell on this concept of everywhere present for a moment, so that each one of us can really get into the idea that everywhere means exactly where I am, and all that that implies. And so in this prayer, I am telling myself over and over again that I am one with all that is, that I am part of its endless creation. And even though my mind cannot take in everything that it implies, I nevertheless remain with it. One. And I do not know how this will translate into actions or thoughts or words in the world, but I let myself have hope and faith and trust that by dwelling upon this oneness and getting clear on it, that something is happening in me. That I am becoming a beacon of light. And that light of oneness is adjusting my activity in the world. So I give thanks for this and for the blessings that it brings into manifestation. I let my heart celebrate. I let myself be expectant. And I let myself walk forward in this world, uplifted, open-hearted, enthusiastic, creative, for I'm remembering who I am. And in deepest gratitude, I let it be, and together we say, and so it is. Followed by a breath in and a sigh.